Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Let's look at finding the total, average, and maximum for a range of dated values in numbers. MacMost is brought to you by a community of supporters. Join us and get exclusive content at MacMost.com/Patreon. So say we have a table here like this. It has a list of dates with a number after it. And sometimes the dates are repeated. Sometimes they're just one per date. Sometimes dates may be skipped. And what we want to do is perform calculations on a range. So for instance, starting with June 3rd, ending on June 7th, get the total just of the rows that fall within those dates. Now if you were to use sum if here, it would be difficult because you don't want to see if it matches a certain date. You want to see if it comes between a range of dates. So what we're going to do is add a column here. And that column is going to contain either true or false depending upon whether the row is in this range here. So we'll start here with this first one and I'll hit the equals key to enter formula mode. And I'll check first to see if this date is greater than or equal to the start date. So I'll click here and I'll do greater than or equal to and then this start date. And I want to set this up to be an absolute value. So it's always pointing to exactly this cell. Now what I get here is a true or false value depending upon whether or not 6-1 is on or after 6-3, which of course is false here. If I were to copy it and then paste it further down, you can see I get a true here because 6-4 is after 6-3. So that's a start. But what I also want to do is check to see whether or not it's before or on this date. So less than or equal to this date. So I put a comma between them and I'm going to put a AND function around the entire thing. So AND with two parameters. One is it greater than or equal to the start date? Another is it less than or equal to the end date? I want to make sure I set this one to be absolute as well. So now when I copy this formula here and paste it in the entire row, I get true and false values and you can see the true values here match the range of dates that I've specified here. If I were to change this and say have it start on 6-2, you could see it now includes 6-2. So now I can use sum if to easily get the total. So I'll do equals, do sum if, and it will be this column here and whether it's true and then give me the sum of this column. And I'll get that there. So I change this. Let's remove the second there and go back to June 3rd. And you can see it updates. We can name this one in range question mark. Now it's just as easy to do average because I can do average if. And I can do the same thing here. I can do the test values, make it true, and then the values to average would be the ones in this column here and I get an average. But how about maximum? Be great if there was a max if function, but there isn't. So we have to get really creative here. We could try to create a range based on the first true and the last true, or the first match of the date and the last match of the date, and then take that range and use that in a max formula to figure out what the maximum value is in that range. That would be really complex, but it's possible. However, there's a much easier way to do it. We're going to add another column here and this is going to be called, I'll just call it max val. And what I'm going to do is a simple formula equals the value here times the value here. And true and false values are treated either as 0 or 1. So a false value would be 0 and I get a value of 0 there. I can copy and then paste throughout here and you can see I get zeros everywhere that is outside of the date range and the actual value everywhere inside the date range. So you'd have to do a little more work here if you had negative values, say. But you're going to get zeros for all the ones you don't want to count. And now I can do a max formula here, select that entire row, and I'll get the value here, in this case 70, which is the maximum there. If I were to cut off the range here and say only to the 4th, you can see the maximum value now is $65 here on the 4th. It updates everything else. So now you have a way to change these two values here and then see different sums, averages, and the maximum value that falls in the date range. One of the great things about doing it this way is it's not dependent on having these sorted. So it doesn't have to be in perfect date order. It doesn't care if you've got one in the middle here that doesn't match. So if I were to put this one as June 1st, you can see that changes to a false value here. It changes the sum there. But it doesn't care that I've got this false value in the middle of all the true values here. Now I can select these two columns here and I can hide them and pretend they're not there, and these formulas here will still work to give me the amounts I want. I publish new tutorials every weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. Then hit the little bell icon to get notifications for each new tutorial.